Hi everyone, welcome to Attacking and Defending Active Directory on Pentester Academy. Please make sure that you check out our other courses on Pentester Academy and you have a look at attackdefense.com, our playground for interesting attack scenarios and labs. In this course, we are going to have a look at Active Directory security. How do we approach attacking it? How do we defend it? How do we bypass defenses? And so many techniques and tricks which will be useful for any security professional. I'm your trainer, Nikhil Mittal. Let's start the course with a couple of things about me. You can find me on Twitter. I am Nikhil underscore MITT there. I blog on labofpenetration.com. My tools and scripts could be found on my GitHub account. I am Samrat Ashok on GitHub. I'm the creator of Nishang, Kautilya, and Deploy Deception, open source toolkits for red teamers and blue teamers. If you're interested in Active Directory security, make sure that you check out Nishang and Deploy Deception. I'm generally interested in offensive information security, offensive PowerShell, new attack vectors, how to attack Active Directory, how to defend Active Directory, and new methodologies to pawn machines, of course, where I have the permission to do so. I have previously spoken at DEF CON, multiple times at Black Hat, trained at CanSecFest, BrewCon, 44Con, and a lot more conferences. So that is about me. Let's get started with the course content. We will begin with very basics. This is a beginner-friendly course, so we'll start with introduction to Active Directory. Then we'll have a look at what PowerShell is, because we are going to use many PowerShell scripts in the course. Then we'll move ahead and check what our attack methodology is going to be. We'll talk about assume breach or attack cycle. Then we'll go for domain enumeration based on the cycle which we discussed. Mapping of trusts and privileges in Active Directory, ACL enumeration. Then we'll move on to local privilege escalation. How do we escalate privileges locally? How do we escalate privileges or hunt for local administrative privileges on other machines? We'll have a look at different methods for this. Once we are done with that, we will have a look at credential replay attacks, how we can use overpass the hash, etc. Then we go for domain privilege escalation using multiple methods. Both attacks and defense for it would be discussed. Then we go for extracting secrets from the domain and the local machines once we have escalated privileges. Then we move ahead and we talk about Kerberos attacks and defense. That is some persistence techniques like golden ticket, silver ticket, skeleton key, abusing the DSRM administrator, abusing ACLs for persistence, etc. We have a look at Kerberos, variants of Kerberos when we talk about privilege escalation. So we'll step back a bit after persistence and see what other privilege escalation methodologies we will have. We will talk about uh, delegation issues in Kerberos, unconstrained and constrained delegation, how that can be abused, how that leads to privilege escalation. Then we move ahead and talk about more persistence techniques like modifying host-based security descriptors onto the domain controller. We will talk about malicious SSPs. What else? So it's a longer course, so I have to recall what else we are going to discuss. In persistence, we talk about, in privilege escalation, we talk about DNS admins. Then we move ahead to privilege escalation from the domain level to the enterprise level. We will see multiple ways of escalating privileges from a leaf node to the forest root, from domain admin of a member domain to the enterprise admin, that is domain admin privileges on the root of the forest. Once that would be done, we would have a look at abusing cross-forest trusts, how we can access resources in a trusted forest. We will also see, when we are talking about abusing forest trust, we'll see how we can abuse SQL Server links to get access to resources across forests. Then we'll spend time on detecting techniques. We will see how we can avoid multiple domain admins in an environment, more than required domain admins. We'll see some security logs which are left by the attacks, which we will discuss. We will see some architectural changes and work cultural changes. We'll have a look at labs, Windows Credential Guard, uh, SID filtering, selective authentication, tier-based administration, Red Forest, which is ESAE, which is also called Red Forest, uh, temporal group memberships, protected users groups, etc. We'll discuss all of these defense mechanisms. We'll see what are the pros and cons of these. We'll also talk about deception as a defense mechanism. We'll also see how we can deploy deception using open source tools, how we can detect or identify the decoy objects, and also how we can avoid identification of the decoy objects. With all of this defense, at the very end, we'll also talk about some PowerShell defense mechanisms, because we will use multiple PowerShell scripts, how we can detect PowerShell based attacks, and also how we can bypass the defenses in PowerShell. So all of this would be covered in the course. So this is a very comprehensive course. Make sure that, and it comes with a lab, right? So I have created this course in a way that if you know just the basics of Active Directory, but you know nothing about Active Directory security, you can approach attacking Active Directory. You can see the course, practice in the lab, come back and see the walkthrough if you miss anything, right? There are multiple learning objectives in the course, and I uh, would be glad if you learn anything interesting out of the course. So what is the goal of the course? As I said, it is best suited for students who take the Attacking and Defending Active Directory lab as well. The course is beginner friendly and assumes no previous experience with Active Directory security, although you're expected to understand basics of Active Directory, right? The course introduces a concept, demonstrates how an attack can be executed, and then have learning objective section where students can practice on the lab. Please keep in mind that the lab is a practice lab. It is not a challenge lab. If you want a challenge lab, check out our Red Team lab on Pentester Academy. Right? Like a real-world Red Team operation, the lab forces you to use built-in tools as long as possible and focuses on functionality abuse, so no patchable exploits in the class. No exploits, no exploitation framework. If you want to use them, feel free, but the class does not use it, or the course does not uses that. We start from a foothold box as a normal domain user and work our way to enterprise admin privileges and privileges across forests. So in the lab, the in-scope machines would be 172.16.1.0 to 172.16.17.0, or only all of these machines are in scope. Nothing else is in scope. Please do not attack out of scope machines, including fellow students' machines. You would log in to or to a Windows machine, Windows VM of your own, uh, and if it is a shared lab, if you are sharing machines with other students, please do not attack fellow students' machines, right? We uh, may be able to detect you. If we detect you, you would be disqualified from the lab for that. And please do not try to access the internet from any lab machine. We have actively disabled it to avoid any accidental or deliberate misuse. And finally, please treat the lab network as a dangerous environment and take care of yourself. So with all this, let's move ahead. What is the philosophy of the course? We will emulate an adversary who has a foothold machine in the target domain. Right? Once again, we will not use any exploit in the class, but will depend on abuse of functionality, features, and misconfigurations, which are rarely patched. So whatever you learn in the class would generally have a very, very long shelf time. We try to use the built-in tools and avoid touching disk on any target as long as possible. And we are not going to use any exploitation framework in the class. So let's begin with introduction to Active Directory. This is going to be quick. Directory services. What is Active Directory? It is a directory service used to manage Windows networks. Quite simple. Active Directory stores information about objects. Everything is an object in Active Directory. So everything is considered an object, its information is stored, and it is made available to users and administrators. The textbook definition is Active Directory enables centralized, secure management of an entire network, which might span a building, a city, or multiple locations throughout the world. So we can go deeper in Active Directory basics, but as I say, that is going to be quick. We are not going to spend any time on that. There are very good courses on MSDN and out there on Active Directory basics. We are not going to do uh, justice with that if we are going to delve there. So this is what Active Directory looks like. It provides a centralized management, security, and interoperability of different types of objects. What types of objects? Windows users, machines, servers, clients, network devices, other directories, etc. Every object has different attributes and properties. A user may have account information, privileges, profiles, policy, and so on. A server may have a management profile, network information, printers, etc. That is how Active Directory looks like. Please keep in mind that when we talk about Active Directory, you think of a domain, but think of it as a forest, not a domain. We'll come back to this in a moment. Now, what are the components of Active Directory? Four major components. Schema, which defines objects and their attributes. For example, how the Windows users attributes, what are the attributes, how would they be stored? That comes in the schema part. Query and index mechanism, because an Active Directory network by definition could spawn multiple locations throughout the world. So there should be a searching and query and index mechanism, right? So that someone can search and publish objects and their properties. Now, because we have query and index mechanism, there must be a catalog which contains information about objects. There is a global catalog which resides with every domain controller in a forest, which contains information about every object in the directory. Finally, because there could be multiple domains and multiple domain controllers, there is a replication service which distributes information across domain controllers, right? So that's about the components. What is the structure of Active Directory? Please always keep in mind when we talk about Active Directory, think about a forest, not a domain. So forests, domains, and organizational units, OUs, are the basic building blocks of any Active Directory structure. So a forest, which is considered a security boundary by Microsoft, contains multiple domains. A domain may have multiple OUs. That's the structure. So because a forest is considered a security boundary, what does that mean? That means if domain 1 is compromised, uh, if anyone can, after compromising domain 1, if anyone can compromise domain 2 or access resources in domain 2 or access resources in the root domain of the forest, that would be considered working as intended. That is not a bug, something which cannot be patched, right? So that would be all about the Active Directory basics. How do we approach attacking Active Directory? We are going to abuse AD components and trusts and will not rely on any patchable exploits. I'm repeating this again and again because people tend to finally ask for any exploits. Can we test Eternal Blue in the lab? No, you cannot. Uh, we will also solely use built-in management tools for all our attacks. That is, we are going to use Windows as an attack platform, no Unix or Linux tools, no Kali Linux or nothing else would be used. Why? Because using the built-in tools, living off the land increases our stealth and flexibility. So we are going to use multiple built-in components. Feel free to use your own VB or JScripts or WMI queries. We are going to rely a lot on PowerShell. Feel free to use C# or any .NET tools as well. Uh, but we are going to use a lot of PowerShell scripts. So what is PowerShell? It provides access to almost everything in a Windows platform and Active Directory environment, which could be useful for an attacker and defender. It provides the capability of running powerful scripts completely from memory, making it ideal for foothold shells and boxes. It's easy to learn and and really powerful. Although we are not going to learn PowerShell, we are going to learn limited use of PowerShell so that we can run offensive PowerShell scripts. Now, based on the .NET framework, PowerShell is based on the .NET framework, of course, and it is tightly integrated with Windows. In fact, PowerShell is system management automation DLL in the .NET framework, right? So all those who want to block PowerShell.exe, please note that. We are going to use Windows PowerShell. There is a platform independent version called PowerShell Core, which is based on .NET Core. But we are going to use Windows PowerShell, which comes installed by default on Windows machines. So a very quick view of how we can use PowerShell. PowerShell's help system is exposed with the help of can be interacted with the help of get help. Get help is a commandlet which interfaces with the help system. All of the tools or most of the tools, PowerShell scripts which we are going to use in the lab are get help compatible. That is, you load the script and then you can use get help to get a help about the functions. So what get help does, it shows a brief help about the commandlet or topic, supports wildcard, comes with various options and filters. There are aliases to it, and we can use get help about underscore topic to list help about conceptual topics. For example, if you run get help star, it lists everything about the help topics. Get help process lists everything which contains the word process. Update helps updates the help system. Right? There are multiple options. For example, we can use dash full for full help, dash examples for just looking at the examples of commandlet. Now, what is a commandlet? Commandlets are used to perform an action, and a .NET object is returned in the output. These are compiled .NET classes. These are not executables. Uh, there are different parameters which commandlets support. For example, here the get help commandlet accepts full parameter or examples parameter. Then there are aliases to commandlets. How do you explore the commandlets on your in your PowerShell session? We can use get command for that. Get command dash command type commandlet. If I run, for example, this lists all the commandlets in the current PowerShell session, right? Now, PowerShell scripts, we can, because PowerShell is not a strongly typed language, we can have native commands, PowerShell functions, .NET, DLLs, Windows API in a single PowerShell script. PowerShell scripts are really powerful and could do much stuff in less lines. PowerShell scripts by default can be edited in ICE or integrated scripting environment. It's a GUI which comes installed by default with PowerShell, right? Then there is something called execution policy when it comes to PowerShell. By default, when you try to run PowerShell scripts on a box, you may get an error that running scripts has been disabled on this machine. That is something which execution policy does. Please keep in mind that it is not a security measure. It is present on the machines to prevent user from accidentally executing scripts. At least that is what now Microsoft says. There are several ways to bypass it, right? None of these require administrator privileges, right? To back up my argument that this is not a security measure, I have this tweet from Jeffrey, the guy who created PowerShell at Microsoft. In October 2015, he says that the reason why PowerShell has an execution policy bypass parameter is to make it absolutely clear that it is not a security layer. So please keep that in mind. Right. Finally, because we are also going to use modules in PowerShell, you can import a module with import module and the path to module. Once the module is imported, we can use get command dash module and the name of the module to list all the commands or functions exported by that particular module, right? Uh, so that is all about PowerShell. Now we can download, how do we execute scripts in PowerShell? One way is to import the module or use dot sourcing, as we saw in the introduction part. But we can also download and execute scripts in memory of PowerShell and use them, right? We can use IEX, which is an alias for invoke expression, and this way to download and execute a script in memory, or we can use a COM object of IE. Version 3 onwards, we can use invoke expression with invoke web request, and there are multiple ways of doing it, right? So feel free to use any one of these in the course. How do we interact with Active Directory using PowerShell? We can use the etc type accelerator. We can use .NET classes like System Directory Services Active Directory. We can call native executables like net.exe from PowerShell and other executables as well. We can also call .NET classes and WMI from a PowerShell script, right? So that is how we can interact with PowerShell and Active Directory. Now, what is going to be our methodology to attack uh, the lab, the practice lab? We are going to use the assume breach scenario, which is used by Microsoft's cloud red teaming, by cloud red team. An assume breach scenario assumes that it is more likely that an organization has already been compromised, but just has not discovered it yet. So in place of the traditional perimeter-based security where you dig trenches and locked and loaded that an enemy will come in and that you can fight the enemy, in place of that, the assume breach scenario, as the name suggests, assumes that you have already been hacked and adversary is already inside the network. It is about time before we discover the adversary, right? That is what assume breach is. There are multiple steps in an assume breach scenario. We are going to focus on three of them: red teaming, insider attack simulation, and blue teaming. Most of the time, we would be focusing on the insider attack simulation. So what would be our approach for the insider attack simulation? Right, as we discussed earlier, we are going to start from a foothold machine, which is part of the target domain, right? That is, we assume that somehow the domain has already been breached, probably a supply chain compromise, or a user has clicked on on a malicious email or link, or somehow an adversary has already access to one of the machines joined to the domain, right? And this is going to be our methodology when we talk about insider attack simulation. Uh, we will skip the recon part where we gather IP addresses, etc., so that we can focus more on the domain part, right? So we start with domain enumeration, right? We do extensive domain enumeration. Once that is done, we go for local privilege escalation. Then once we have escalated our privileges, get access to new machine or anything, we do recon once again, right? Once we have enough knowledge, we go for the lateral movement part, right? We start logging into different machines, accessing different machines and services to check if we have access to any interesting privileges. Once we have find out any machine where or any method where we can escalate privileges to the domain, we go for domain admin privileges. Once that is done, we go for cross-trust attacks. That is, we escalate privileges from domain admin to enterprise admin, then from enterprise admin to different trusted forests. And because it's a cyclic process, we go for persistence meanwhile so that we can maintain our privileges, right? Uh, our lab environment is a fully patched Server 2016 environment. Windows Defender is enabled on the lab. We have Server 2016 forest functional level, and the domain functional level is also Server 2016. There are multiple forests and multiple domains. But because this is a practice lab, we have minimal firewall usage so that we focus more on concepts of the domain, right? This is a representative diagram of the lab. Depending on if your lab is hosted on a cloud or a dedicated server, you may or may not need VPN credentials. So that is all in the course introduction, I believe. Sorry. That would be all about the course introduction. In the next video, we start with domain enumeration and go right away attacking the target environment. So that would be all for this video. Thank you very much for watching.